Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome everybody. Excited to study with you. We are at the end of the 9th chapter. My guess is we're around text 26. Yes, we are. Just to recap, the 9th chapter of the Gita starts out in a very formulaic way with Krishna defining the information he's going to be explaining, telling you the result of learning that information and the qualifications you need. It's called a chatushtaya. It's kind of a standard 4 things that you get at the beginning of a text. And so Krishna explains this knowledge. Moksha se ashubhat. It'll liberate you from all that is inauspicious, and that the knowledge is Raja Vidya Raja Kuhyam. It's the greatest king of secrets, and the knowledge of kings. He explains that you're required to have Shraddha, faith, and we troubleshot that faith is really enough interest to sincerely do the experiment, and that once you get a decent hypothesis, then you have to go ahead and do the experiment, and the faith isn't just some blind thing that you do. And then Krishna lays out the real primary knowledge of the chapter, the real hit of the chapter, which is Panentheism. That Te Mai, it is in me, Nateshu Aham, I am not in it. Which, Panentheism the term was coined in the 1850s. It's a relatively recent concept in Western philosophy. The idea is first articulated in the Upanishads. It's the idea that the deity is both transcendent as well as immanent. The world is divine, coming from a divine source. Therefore, panentheists are monists. They believe in one source of everything. At least in our version they are. I guess theoretically you could conceive of a dualistic panentheism. So that might it's not that it's required. But the world is, in our case, divine. There's nothing which is fundamentally evil, fundamentally bad. And at the same time, God is not merely immanent or in this world. God is also transcendent. I'd rather you be up here in a chair where I can see you. So if you need back support, grab yourself a chair, but sit up here. God is not merely immanent, but the deity is also transcendent and beyond this world. They are in me, I am not in them. Pan and Theos, all in God. And then Krishna gives the most brilliant natural example you could possibly come up with to illustrate what he's trying to teach. He says that just like air or wind is within space. Air, the molecules, oxygen and carbon dioxide and whatever else is in the air, carbon monoxide. Air exists within space, but space does not intermingle with air in any kind of fundamental sense, because you could remove all the air out of space with a vacuum, let's say, and space would still remain as an accommodating principle. You're getting really tricky there, dude. It's taking you a long time to settle into your space. Just sit and participate. Thank you. Sometimes people open up the flowers and they go like crinkle, crinkle, crinkle for like 8 minutes trying to be quiet, and They don't realize they're making more noise. Sometimes people also whisper. They do a falsetto. Let's be quiet. They don't realize that that's way louder than just saying, let's be quiet. Let's be quiet. Let's be quiet is way less loud than let's be quiet. Don't ever whisper. Just talk at a low volume in your normal voice. And don't ever crinkle me to death with the flowers. Just tear them open and let's get back to class. And don't take 8 minutes to open up your book stand. Just plop on down, sit down, focus. All right, here we go. Krishna gives us a masterful example of air existing within space. The space is linked to the air. It's there, but it's also beyond the air, and it exists separate from the air. Krishna is both within this world, and really everything is connected to divinity, coming from the same source. Therefore, everything is divine-like on some level. But that doesn't mean that the deity does not also exist outside of space and time. Just as space exists outside and beyond the molecules that it houses. Did you guys follow that? Okay. So Krishna gives that great example, and then he just keeps jumping back and forth. You know, how he's related to the world. It's Swam Prakriti, it's my Prakriti. Nija Prakriti. Mayadhyakshena, I'm overseeing Prakriti. At the same time, Udasina Vat, I'm situated indifferently. Asina means sitting. From like asana, asina is the verb. Asina, utasina, seated as if apart, seated above. Udasina Vat, seated indifferently. And so Krishna jumps back and forth between owning Maya and owning Prakriti, and at the same time being aloof from Prakriti, really trying to help us understand this idea, which in many ways is inconceivable, in that you either think about how Krishna is related to the world or he's not related to the world. But then when you try to simultaneously fathom that God is within everything and beyond everything, it really forces you to stretch your mind. It becomes translogical. It goes beyond. Now, it doesn't imply any fault in the deity. The very nature of an omnipotent being is they would be able to do two things at once. But there is a limitation to how deeply we can conceive of that with our limited minds. You follow? Normally we explain Krishna touches Maya in this way, but is aloof in this way, and we make it make sense. But to really fathom how fully Krishna is present in everything and how fully Krishna is aloof from everything, at some point, your mind will meet its maker, and you'll run to the limit of what you can actually conceive of. You follow? We can usually paint the broad strokes and say, on this it's here, and on this it's here, and make a cogent philosophical argument. But at some point, if you really want to understand the enormity and completeness of how Krishna is in this world but not of it, it's mind-boggling. It takes you to the last limits of logic. Takes you beyond logic into transcendence. And then Krishna explains, some people can appreciate this, and they become Daivi Prakritim Ashritya. They become sheltered by the spiritual energy, and some people are Mohini Prakriti Ashrita. They take shelter of the deluding, illusory potency. And so it's really two fundamental ways of interfacing with this world. Prabhupada used to say you either bow down to Krishna or you bow down to Krishna as time in the form of death. But bowing down it happens either way. Krishna himself says, Mrityu Sarva Haraschaham, that he is death which takes everything away. Kalo Asmi Lokakshaya Krit Pravridham. Time I am the great destroyer of the world. So, and then Krishna explains that these devotees, they take dridha brakta, they take great vows, and They satatam kirtayantamam. They always do kirtan about him. But then he explains there's other people out there who worship God pritakvena and as many different deities, and ekadvena as the oneness that ties everything together, and bahuda in various different ways, and vishvato mukam, they worship God as a universal form, jnana yagyena, and they worship God in the sacrifice of knowledge. And then Krishna begins to chastise such worshippers as ultimately worshiping God avidhipurvakam, inappropriately, and saying chavantite, they fall down, because na abhijanati, they don't understand what? That bhoktaram yagyatapasam aham hi sarva yagyanam bhokta cha prabhu evacha, that he's both the master and the enjoyer of all yagna, and that everything is actually about him. And even they do big soma yagya, they become purified. We discussed soma yagya, the entheogenic sacrifice in the Vedic times. We discussed it last week, and we explained how, even then they eventually fall down again, because they don't understand that Krishna is actually at the top of the totem pole. And in contrast to the big, huge rituals that ultimately get you nothing, except for repeated birth and death, you can just worship Krishna by thinking of him. Ananya chintayanto mam, ye jana paryupasate. People who worship him just by thinking of him. Those people who are nityabhiyuktanam, they're always yoked to him. Yogakshemam bahamyaham, and he's able to carry them what they lack and preserve what they have. And those people, patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati, they just offer Krishna the simplest, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water. And that offering with bhakti is sufficient. He actually repeats the word bhakti twice in this verse. Patram pushpam palam toyam. One leaf, one flower, one fruit, one drop of water. Yome bhaktya prayachati. If you offer that to me with bhakti, tad aham bhaktyupahritam ashnami, I will eat that thing which was offered by bhakti. Mentions the word bhakti twice. Prayata atmana, by a saintly soul. And that's the verse we finished on. And then he continues. He says, Yat karoshi adashnasi yas juhosi dadasyat. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, whatever austerities you perform, do that as an offering to me. Your whole life becomes an offering. Your life becomes a living yagna. It's my audience. I'm just going to speak something a little unpleasant. We're on text 27. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. I'm just kind of, nope, I'm not going to say it. It's too tangential. It'll disturb all your minds. Although it's a really good point. Anyway, your life, jivan mukta, you're liberated even while living. And your whole life becomes a yagna to Krishna, because everything you do as an offering. So the ritual of such a devotee, they offer simple things like we do in arti, but then their whole life becomes dovetailed to Krishna. Dove's tails are two feathers and then it becomes one. It's a term used in carpentry where you have kind of two pieces of, like two hooks in the wood and it fits into one. It's a old form of cabinetry where the wood fits together without nails or anything like that. And the wood's just, and so you dovetail. You fit everything together seamlessly. And so your whole life becomes an offering to Krishna. And by doing that, you'll be free from bondage to work. And it's auspicious and inauspicious results. It's a classic point that's made in the Gita, that you get free from good and bad karma. No one wants to be free from good karma. Everyone wants to enjoy good karma. They want to be free from bad karma. But ultimately, transcendence means freeing yourself from good and bad karma and being transcendental. Going beyond karma. Going beyond this world. With your mind fixed on me and this principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and come to me. Krishna mentioned before, you'll be liberated from all inauspiciousness. And here he's saying, how do you do that? By living a life of devotion, by offering Krishna things with bhakti. Not by doing incredible temple worship. Not by doing incredibly sophisticated yajna. Not by any of that. And then he speaks this one. Samoham sarva bhuteshu na dveshti na asti priyaha. This is like a famous verse. I envy no one. I hate no one. Nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service to me in devotion as a friend is in me, and I am also a friend to him. We should look at the Sanskrit of this verse to really appreciate it. Samoham sarva bhuteshu. Sama means same. Sama aham. I am the same. Sarva bhuteshu, to all beings. I'm the same to all beings. Na dveshti. I don't hate anybody. Na asti priyaha. And I don't love anybody. What does priya mean? Natarajan, you're what? Tamil?
No.
Where are you from? Tamil Nadu? Where are you from? With a name like Natarajan, it's pretty easy to guess. What does priya mean?
Love.
It means love, affection, right? Dearness. Nadveshti asti na priyaha. It means I don't love anybody, I don't hate anybody. That would be the best English translation. You could say no one, I don't favor anybody, or I'm not, overly affectionate to anybody, or no one's dear to me, nor do I deride anybody. Dvesha comes from dvisha, involves derision. But if you really want to cleanly translate it in English, I am equal to everybody. I don't hate anybody or love anybody. It would be a great translation, very literal. Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya. This is, again, it's a double usage of bhaj. Bhaj means worship. It's where you get the word bhakti from. Ye bhajanti. Tu. But those who worship me, me, bhaktya, with devotion. So the word bhakti is mentioned twice. Bhajanti means they worship, and bhaktya means with devotion. But the word bhajanti actually is the same root as the word bhakti. Do you guys follow this? So it's another verse where he mentions the word bhakti twice. He just did that. Now he does it again. Prabhupada was meeting with a Shaiva in South India, in Chennai, 1972, I believe. Big Shaiva, big follower of Shiva. In South India, everyone either follows Vishnu or Shiva, and they hate each other. They've been fighting for 1,000 years and killing each other. Isn't it?
Yeah, but there are people like Ayers who are both believers in both.
They're Panchopasakas. They don't count. But the big groups, big followers of Shiva, big followers of Vishnu, the Ramanujis, the Madhvas, all over South, tens of millions of Vaishnavas, tens of millions of Shaivas, and they've hated each other for such a long time. Do not deny this. I know the history. You know the history. When the Madhva sannyasis urinate, the Madhva sannyasis, the Vaishnav sannyasis of one sect, very popular sect in Karnataka, when they also in South India, when they urinate, they chant a mantra. I'm urinating on Shankaracharya. Every time they urinate, they chant a mantra that they're urinating on Shankaracharya, a very famous Shaiva, very famous impersonalist. You understand? They've been murdering each other, hating each other for 1,000 years, at least. Prabhupada met with a big Shaiva. We are Vaishnavas. And Prabhupada said, the Shaiva said, so who is supreme, Vishnu or Shiva? Prabhupada was very expert. He said to him, In Sanskrit, we have two words, puja and bhakti. Don't say puja. Puja means pus. Puja, worship. Gotta remember, with that A should be there, you gotta leave it there. Puja and bhakti. Puja means worship. You do puja and you do worship to get something. Like most people, you go to church or the temple, you offer some dakshina. Again, dakshin. What does dakshin mean? You don't know. Dakshin means right, and it also means south, because the Indians face east as their primary direction. And so if you're facing east, what's on your right hand side? The south. It has other meanings. It means proper too. It has other meanings. So dakshin means south. And then it also means dakshina means donation. So people go to a temple, again, the long and the short. You go to a temple and you give some dakshina, some donation. And you do some puja and you ask for some benediction. Prabhupada said, but there's another word, bhakti, when simply out of love you serve Krishna with no expectation of return. Prabhupada made this point, that the Shaivas are seeking material benedictions, but they don't have bhakti. And the guy was smart, he was a pundit, he said, what if you have bhakti for Shiva? And Prabhupada's answer was, then you're the exception, not the rule. Because that's generally how people worship Shiva. Read your scriptures, you'll see. Read the prayers. They're always about getting some material reward. The prayers to Vishnu go beyond that. But all the prayers to the Devatas, including Shiv, they're all about getting some material benediction. We could make another argument. Bhakti as a process is puja. Bhakti as a goal is bhakti. Bhakti as a goal, as a sadhya, as a goal. Sadhana, sadhya. You know these words?
No,
Sadhya means goal. Same root. You guys notice I'm dropping a lot more Sanskrit? Because I have some South Indian, and so I'm thinking, this is very good, and so now I get a chance to speak to a more educated audience than you guys, and so I get to demonstrate a little more about what I spend most of my life studying instead of dumbing it down so that it's easy for you guys to follow. So I flow better when I can quote verses, and just, that's how I was trained. So anyway, bhakti as a goal, then you have to believe that the deity is forever. If you think the deity is not forever, and eventually Shivoham, that you will become Shiva. If you believe that upon achieving moksha or liberation, you become one with divinity, then there is no bhakti as a goal. Bhakti as a goal requires a Vaikuntha. It requires a place where you go and you serve the Lord forever. You embrace the Lord forever. You dance with the Lord forever. The Shaivas don't have that conception. Read their own texts. Eventually you realize you are one with Shiva. If you're one, then your bhakti was only ever puja, because it was always designed to get you something, even if that something was liberation, at which point you become one with the deity. The only way to have bhakti as a goal is if you believe that the deity is forever, and you'll worship and love that deity in perpetuity. You follow? There's several ways you could make this argument. Anyway, Prabhupada had this conversation. I was reminded of it, this conversation. Yesterday was Shivaratri. Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya. But if you worship me with bhakti, and here's the verse, listen up. Te mai, you're in me. Krishna said that before, right? He says, Te Mai, you're in me. And then what's the second half of that statement? Huh? In English. What? No. It's everything is in me, and I said it before, panentheism. God is immanent and transcendent. Don't guess. Either you know it or you don't. I already told you this. If you have a memory that lasts more than 10 minutes, you'll remember. Because I purposely seeded it into the class. You won't find it in the book. You'll only find it if you were listening carefully at the beginning, which it's looking more and more like none of you were. Everything is in me. And what's the back half of the statement today, OG?
I'm not in them.
Ravi, got it. Another South Indian. Everything is in me, and I'm not in it. Immanence and transcendence. God's beyond everything. Remember when I said this at the beginning of class? Do you remember it now? It was purposeful. I wasn't rambling. You remember? And now Krishna says, he said it 3 times. Te Mayina Te Shvaham. He said it in the 7th chapter, in the 8th chapter, and the 9th chapter. And what's he say here at the end of the 9th chapter? He says, Te Mai, they're in me, just like he said before. Api Te Shuaham. And I am in them. That's a straight contradiction. Krishna said over and over again, everything is in me, but I'm beyond everything. But now he says, Te Mai api te shuaham. They're in me, and even I'm in them. Why would he contradict himself from earlier in the chapter? Why would he contradict the basic theology that makes up the beginning and the core of this chapter? Why would he contradict it? I taught you this years ago. I taught a whole class on it for 2 hours. You don't remember. I've taught this many times over the years. None of you remember. It's such an important point. All right, Mason, take your mask off and yell at me.
Well, he's mentioned Bhakti.
Oh, you think that counts as yelling at me? I don't have to repeat what you said. You really think that counts as yelling at me?
Well, he's mentioned Bhakti.
You think that counts as yelling? I'm saying yell at me. So I don't have to repeat what you say.
He's mentioned Bhakti twice now in this verse, and by contradicting himself, I think he's bringing up a further point that Bhakti is a different connection, a deeper connection to God than just...
Your voice is going down and down and down. Don't do that. Talk loud from the beginning. Do it again.
He's mentioned Bhakti twice now in this verse, and by bringing that up along with the point of Bhakti, I think he's alluding to the fact that there is a deeper connection in the path of Bhakti than the other baseline logic that he's brought up.
Did you hear that today? I'm not this isn't like some kind of drill camp thing. I don't want to have to repeat what you say. And the mic is this way, and I used to turn it and face you with it, but then Kim chastised me and told me it ruins the class and people can't hear it. So now I can't touch the mic, and I don't want to be like the town crier who repeats whatever you say. So there it is. You started loud, but you're mumbling by the end. So you just need to make it loud the whole time. Yeah, excellent answer. Bravo. Excellent answer. You probably could have tidied it up just a bit, but you got it. Krishna's making the point that bhakti breaks down the basic structure of reality. And although the basic structure of reality is that God is transcendent to everything, bhakti breaks down the very fabric of reality and makes God impossibly accessible. And through grace and bhakti, the unknowable becomes knowable, the untouchable becomes touchable, the unembraceable becomes embraceable, the invisible becomes visible, and we're able to touch divinity. And that Krishna becomes romantically and intimately involved with his devotee who has bhakti. Essentially, Krishna becomes compromised and vulnerable by bhakti. Krishna says, Prem Vashya, he's controlled by love. Think about it. It's powerful. Would an all-good, all-powerful God be conquerable by love? Think about it. You want to get vexed? Would an all-good God who is all-powerful still be conquerable by love? As far as I can see, the answer is yes. A God who could not love couldn't be all good. And love, by its very nature, necessitates vulnerability. Love means people affect you. Love requires empathy. And empathy means you let yourself be affected by people. The very nature of love is it's the good side of relativity. And so an all-good God, an all-powerful God would actually have to be supremely absolute as well as supremely relative. Otherwise, there'd be something lacking in divinity. Did you follow this point, Natarajan?
Yeah,
Very heavy point. You could attend 10,000 pravachans and not hear this point. Te mai api te shu aham. They are in me, I am in them. Listen to Prabhupada's purport. The example is often given that the Lord is like a desire tree. And whatever one wants from the desire tree, the Lord supplies. It's the last paragraph. The example is often given. The Lord is like a desire tree. Whatever you want, the Lord supplies. Easy, right? Like a great Amazon in the sky. But here the explanation is more complete. You guys know the Amazon has A to Z in the logo, right? You learned that from me, or you figured it out on your own? Good logo. That arrow also looks like a phallic symbol, which is like, I don't think that was even accidental. I think they do that on purpose too. Phallic symbols are like, have been all the rage for thousands of years. You know, it's like a very popular power symbol. And so I even think that was on purpose. But the Amazon, A to Z, they give you everything you want. Wild, right? The example is often given that the Lord is like a desire tree. And whatever one wants from the desire tree, the Lord supplies. But here the explanation is more complete. The explanation of the verse, because the verse has a basic contradiction in it. I'm equal to everyone, and these people, these special people are in me and I'm in them. You follow? So how do you rescue that? It's pretty easy. You just say, Krishna reciprocates with you as you want to approach Krishna. So if you want an intimate relationship with Krishna, Krishna's open to that. If you don't want one, then Krishna doesn't give you that. And so Krishna's neutral. He'll give an intimate relationship to anybody. And you want that, so good. And you don't want that, so no. And that's what accounts for the basic contradiction in the verse where he says, I'm equal to everyone and I favor the devotees. You follow? And so the standard explanation is this, the desire tree. It's a perfect explanation. It's perfectly reasonable. But now he says the explanation here is more complete. What? The Lord is here stated to be partial to the devotees. And his partiality, Prabhupada is going to say, is a bhushana. What does bhushana mean? Bhushan. Yeah, or ornament, right? Bhushana, bhushana. Krishna is the ornament of ornaments. When Krishna wears beautiful gems, he makes the gems look more beautiful. You follow? Krishna's cheeks look like a lake of liquid blue sapphires. Krishna's more beautiful than the ornaments he wears. So, the point Prabhupada is making here is that what would normally be considered to be a dushana, a fault, is actually a bhushana, an ornament. Dushana means fault. Bhushana means ornament. We think that partiality should be seen as a fault. But actually, a deity who could not be partial, who could not fall in love, would be imperfect. Nietzsche once said, I could believe in a God who would dance. You follow? Krishna is that deity. God filled with, comprised of love. Love personified. The transcendental Cupid. The all-attractive one. And the partiality of that deity is not a fault, but an ornament. It's actually not quite possible to appreciate this point logically. The logical explanation is that, and I'm going to try my best to explain this very special point that Prabhupada wants to make in his purport in as rigorous and logical a way as possible. So please listen carefully. I don't think I've ever explained this before like I'm about to now. The logical explanation is Krishna is open. He's giving his mercy to everyone like a rain cloud. If you stop covering yourself up with an umbrella, you'll feel the rain. The rain is for everyone. Krishna loves all of his souls. He is the Supreme Lord. He loves all of his children equally. And anytime you open the door through bhakti, Krishna will come through the door and magically manifest in your life. Krishna does not play favorites. He loves everybody equally and everybody completely. You follow this? That explanation is perfect. There is no way to logically improve an explanation, and it reconciles the 2 points in the verse. That explanation is not appreciated by the Vaishnava, especially not by the Karshna, the follower of Krishna. A Karshna is a follower of Krishna. So, for the Vaishnavas who worship Krishna, this explanation has some deficiency. They fall in love with Krishna. Krishna becomes their child. Mother Yashoda, she puts Nrsimha Kavacha on Krishna's arm to protect him. She feeds him from her breast in heaven. There's an angel in heaven who has the form of a mother, and the Supreme Lord suckles her breast. This is our conception of the intimacy that can exist between the soul and God. She is in a spiritual form, Krishna is in a spiritual form, and they have that intimate an exchange of love. They cannot think Krishna's God. If you thought Krishna was God, would you feed Krishna from your breast? No, they think Krishna is their child. How long do they feel that way? Forever. If you show Mother Yashoda the universe in Krishna's mouth, she'll think she had a fainting spell because the sun was too hot. Do you understand? She has to forget his Bhagavatva, his divinity, in order to fall in love with him. For her, the Supreme Lord is her child. He's still the Supreme Lord. His Bhagavatva, his divinity, is running like the Saraswati River underground through all his pastimes. And it bubbles up occasionally. He lifts Govardhan Hill. He does some miraculous thing. But for the most part, Krishna hides his divinity because it would obstruct the love which flows through Vrindavan. It's the way and the weft of Vrindavan. Vaikuntha, the Lord, is the classical conception of divinity. Narayan, filled with all opulence. Everyone bows down, offers prayers. Vrindavan's not like that. The cowherd boys jump on Krishna's back. So he gives them a piggyback ride. They wrestle with him and beat him in wrestling. They feed him with their hand from their plate. Their prasad, their remnants, they feed him. Baladev sometimes gets tired and he has Krishna sit down so he can lay his head on his lap and take a nap. The Supreme Lord carries the shoes of his father on his head because he's too small to carry them in his hands. His father's chappals. His father said, bring me my shoes. I tell my children all the time, bring me my shoes. Krishna has to put the shoes on his head because they're too heavy and then run to bring his father's shoes. That's Krishna. God in love. He has to forget his divinity. The devotees have to forget his divinity. And they immerse themselves in pastimes that bewilder even Brahma and Shiva. Even the demigods cannot understand Krishna Lila. They become bewildered. They can't figure it out. How did the Supreme Lord, the cause of all causes, why is he behaving just like a child? In love with his devotees, forgetting his own divinity, disporting himself on equal terms with his devotees, even taking the junior position. And all good God would be able to love on that level. And that love requires favoritism because Krishna has to love his parents. You follow? He has to love the gopis. He has to love the cowherd boys. He has to have a special relationship with his cows. If that deity didn't play favorites, it would be like if your child didn't love you specially. You follow? He just treated you like a stranger. It would be a flaw. In that universe, in Braj, in Vrindavan, for the Lord to not play favorites, there would be a deficiency. For logicians, we have the first explanation, and Prabhupada offers it. But he says this is more, it's better. The fault of favoritism is an ornament if your conception is that God has fallen in love. He would have to exist in two spheres and have a lower form that was loving everyone equally. But on the highest level, at the highest echelon, there'd have to be a place where he just fell in love. Therefore, Narayan comes from Krishna and not vice versa. Therefore, Golok is above Vaikuntha. Because this is the zenith of the potential of every soul to love Krishna like this. But the experience of that devotee is that Krishna loves just them. When the gopis danced with Krishna, demigods or whatever who were fortunate to witness, they could see Krishna in tens of thousands of forms dancing with all the gopis. The gopis could not see that. They could see that Krishna had chosen to dance with them over all others. The cowherd boys, when they were eating with Krishna, every cowherd boy felt like Krishna was sitting and just eating with him. The experience of a devotee is that Krishna is just with them. That he just loves them. Philosophically, we can understand. Tattva vichar, from the point of view of tattva, we can understand that Krishna is reciprocating with everybody perfectly. He's omnipotent and all good. But within Lila Vichar, from the experience of Krishna, Krishna's favoritism becomes the core of the relationship. Did you follow this? The Lord is here stated to be partial to the devotees. Prabhupada's not even running from it anymore. He's just saying it. There it is. He said, I'm not partial. Then he says, actually I am. And partial in the sense that he changes the basic structure of reality and his transcendence is compromised and the Lord becomes tangibly and palpably accessible. This is the manifestation of the Lord's special mercy to the devotees. It's special. It's favoritism. It's something special. It's not just your average grace. You follow? Prabhupada used to speak about Vyasti Guru and Samasti Guru. Vyasti means the manifested Guru. And Samasti, focus. And Samasti means the collective Guru, the complete Guru. The Vyasti Guru is your Guru coming down into this world to teach you about Krishna Bhakti, like an angel. The Samasti Guru is Krishna himself in the hearts of all living beings directing their wanderings. You follow? But Narad Muni, he says, Prahlad, sit. Prahlad, he says that my spiritual master found me drowning in the darkest well of ignorance, and he picked me up. How could I ever leave his service? Prabhupada quoted that about his own Guru Bhaktisiddhanta. He quoted that verse on the boat when he came to America on a cargo ship and had 2 heart attacks on the cargo ship on the way here. When he was in Boston Harbor, I believe it was on September 13th, 1965, he wrote a poem. And in that poem he quoted Prahlad. How could I ever give up his service? How could I ever give up the service of my Guru? Prabhupada himself traveled 8,000 miles on a boat, 35 days. I mean, it's like no joke. He waited till the U.S. opened up. We've been closed. Our border's been closed for almost 80 years to Indians because all the Punjabis were coming and cutting down trees in the Pacific Northwest and stealing jobs from white Americans. And so they put a ban on Indians coming into this country for almost 70 years. And it was repealed. The Immigration Act in 1965 repealed it and let thousands and thousands of Indians. Prabhupada was one of the first people to get a visa. He'd been waiting for years to get a visa. Came to the U.S. He quoted this because he was instructed by his Guru in 1922 to come to the West. He waited for 43 years. He was 69. He waited for 43 years. 2/3 of his life, he was waiting. He got the instruction. He was a young man, 1922. He was 26 years old. He was 69 years old by the time he could finally jump on that boat and fulfill the instruction. He celebrated Janmashtami and his birthday on that boat. Turned 69 on the ship. He thought that people only ate meat and potatoes in the U.S. He was planning to live on potatoes here. He didn't know that we had other vegetables. He somehow had heard that we ate meat and potatoes, and so he thought that's all that we had to eat. He brought a big bag of puffed rice. He was going to live on puffed rice and potatoes. His experience of his Guru, it's like, yeah, Krishna's the Guru. It's true. But no. When Prabhupada had to go back to India in 1967 for his health, his disciples said, could you send some other Vaishnava here to guide us while you're gone? And Prabhupada began crying. And he said, my Guru is no ordinary Guru. He could never be replaced. Prabhupada was actually pained by the fact that his fledgling disciples were so stupid and ignorant and immature. They were such fair-weathered friends, such shallow people, that they thought he was replaceable. You follow? He didn't even chastise them. You have to understand, he just Like the story is told, but there's no problem chastising and saying, no, you should not feel like this. He just said to himself, my guru was no ordinary spiritual master. He was irreplaceable. He didn't say, and you should feel like that, but he didn't say, he just cried and said that. If you understand something, then you read it and you realize their fault. You follow? We feel this way about our gurus, and we feel this way about Krishna. He's irreplaceable. He's unique. He's there for us. He loves us in a special way. He's been especially merciful to us. He's been especially kind to us. If we telescope back, we can see him being kind to everyone. But if you telescope back, where are you not? You're not with Krishna. Who said that? You're not with Krishna. You're apart. Within the Leela, within the experience of divinity, the fabric of the universe has been changed. And Krishna's right there with you. Fully accessible, fully in love with you, as much as you're in love with him. Just with you. It's a little more complicated. He's just with you and the devotees that you serve with, and you're one big happy family. And he has these unique, miraculous relationships with everybody, including with you. But he's on your team, not on that team. You follow? If you telescope back, he's on that team too. But you don't see that. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and when there was the Rath Yatra, and there were all the different dancing parties, Mahaprabhu was seen to be in the center of each party. But for the people in that party, they were like, wow, he's chosen us over all the other groups. He's just with us. That intimate, personal, romantic, special experience of it's Krishna just loves you in a special way, and it's just him and you against the world, and you and your tribe against the world. You can't see the neutrality while experiencing that. Prabhupada is making this point. It's the Lord's special mercy to the devotee. The Lord reciprocates. The Lord's reciprocation should not be considered to be under the law of karma. Don't think, Krishna has to be equal there, equal here, equal here. Don't do that. You'll spoil the whole thing. You'll spoil it. You know? Somebody spontaneously embraces you and they're crying and they're hugging you, and you start counting their tears and then making sure they cry the exact same amount of tears with everybody else they hug. Don't do it. Don't spoil it. Just be bathed in those tears and feel special and feel the intimacy that's possible. The Lord's reciprocation should not be considered under the laws of karma. It belongs to the transcendental situation in which the Lord and his devotees function. Bhakti is not of this world. It takes you beyond this world. That is the special thing of bhakti. The unconquerable becomes conquered. The unknowable becomes knowable. The unembraceable becomes embraceable. Krishna becomes a child, suckles your breast, climbs on your back. You climb on his. You dance the night away. He loves just you. You're special to him. He's special to you. You have a unique relationship. That is what bhakti, in its purest form, and its Braj Bhakti form, that's what it offers. And just the slightest hint of this is in this verse. It's just the slightest hint of it is there. But Prabhupada, being a pure Vaishnava, fleshes out the deep meaning and the implications of this. Devotional service to the Lord is not an activity of this material world. It goes beyond logic. It goes beyond reason. It's impossible. Krishna loves you impossibly. It's not an activity of this material world. What's not? Bhakti. That's been so prominently featured in these verses. And Prabhupada is just bringing them to life. Just opening up the verse and showing limitless possibilities. Picking up on Krishna's repetition of the word bhakti over and over and over again. Devotional service to the Lord is not an activity of the material world. It's part of the spiritual world. Again, bhakti in practice is just puja. You're looking for something material, even liberation. Bhakti in perfection means Krishna's there forever, and in our form, bhakti is also there in Vaikuntha, the classical conception of God where he's big and you're small. But in Vrindavan, Krishna becomes small. And even more lovable, even more intimately lovable. It's part of the spiritual world where eternality, bliss, and knowledge predominate. What a beautiful verse, huh? Today, give me some feedback.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. This is very, very, very interesting. I wasn't following closely the intricacies of Krishna being partial or not until you brought up the example how the gopis feel that Krishna is only with them. And in order for that feeling to exist, Krishna cannot be equals to everybody because they're feeling that Krishna is with them alone. So that requires partiality. So that when you made that point, it was clear to me, and I truly appreciate that.
Krishna eventually says to the gopis, Naparayaham, I'm not able to repay you. Because they love him, and he's always having to spread his love around. And so the amazing thing about bhakti is it puts Krishna at a disadvantage. Because the devotees just love Krishna. And he has to love all of us. And he becomes bewildered by this singular focus the devotees have on him. How much they love just him. How beautiful he is for them. How they fall madly in love with just him. How he's everything to them. And then he becomes curious. What would it be like to be my own devotee? And he thinks, who's the best devotee? And he sees Srimati Radharani. And then he becomes really bewildered because her love is just otherworldly to an extreme. And Krishna exploring that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. More? Loud? Loud?
I was thinking that even in this world, we would think of somebody as being a monster if they can't reciprocate with love when somebody is submitting themselves to them and serving them and having faith.
If we throw ourselves at Krishna with gay abandon, full-fledged, full-hearted, without reservation, and we absolutely surrender to Krishna, unreservedly, unalloyed, how do you reciprocate with that? How does the Supreme Lord reciprocate with that? He has to love us like that too. Ultimately, he can love everybody like that. But that love is not experienced as being this a little bit here, a little bit there. It's everything here, and everything there, and everything here. And so we can telescope out and we can articulate it philosophically. But then that misses the magic of the actual experience, and that's why you read Shakespeare to understand love and not some neurology book. One more, loud.
So, I'm having trouble.
Loud.
I'm having trouble going from this logical conception.
That's why it's inconceivable.
Right.
I'm not trying to help you understand both of them as being streamlined. They're two very different darshans. It's tattva vichar and lila vichar. Examining it from the point of view of truth and examining it from the point of view of intimacy. They are both reasonable and they are contradictory. And you vacillate between them. And you jump back and forth. And in this world you can appreciate tattva, and in that world you cannot. And when you experience Krishna's love, it is always experienced in this intimacy, unless you're less of a lover. And your ultimate vision is to be able to see the equality of the Supreme Lord, like maybe in Vaikuntha. And that becomes as deep as you can go. But when you want to embrace Krishna, and you want to bathe Krishna with your tears, and you want to call him your own child, then that's the experience. In the spiritual world, when Brahma could not understand, and he stole all the cowherds' boys, and he stole the cows, and he hid them in a cave. Krishna then, to teach him a lesson, became all the cowherd boys and all the cows. And those parents of all the different cowherd boys thought, why do we love our sons so much more than we ever have before? It was because Krishna became their son. And they always wanted Krishna to be their son. And so that pastime for Brahma coincided with the intimate desires for Krishna to be their son that all the Brijvasis have, and Krishna became their child. So they could feel that love of Yashoda and Nanda. Even the cows fell more in love with their calves. Vrindavan is about intimacy. The intimacy of the Supreme. And intimacy requires partiality. And Krishna can do both. You just can't simultaneously conceive of both. That doesn't imply any deficiency on the part of Krishna. It just applies a deficiency in the part of your logical mind to fully grasp the absolute. We stretch our minds logically, and we grow, and at some point, we transcend them, and we experience Krishna. We climb up the mountain of truth and dive into a lake of rasa. And so Prabhupada, as an expert Rasik Vaishnav, who's capable of tasting ras, he is exploring it here appropriately in one of the most far-out verses in the entire Gita, where Krishna deconstructs reality and explains how he becomes accessible to and compromised by love. And then when you approach Krishna with this kind of intense bhakti, he's in you, you're in him, and you fall in love with each other. And the final point I'll make is a deity that was not capable of this love would not be all good. And an all good, all powerful deity would do this, along with everything else. And that's Vrindavan. Okay, thank you very much for attending. Hare Krishna.